property prices in multiple areas around Australia continue to break new records. But what's expected to happen next is quite scary. Today, I'm going to go through what's happening in our major property markets city by city. I'm going to share where most of the issues are, especially for new buyers, and why so many property investors will look back at 2024 with regret. Hi, it's Nero here, and Australian property prices have continued to rise in April. Housing values rise 0.6% in April as low supply trumps high interest rates and inflation. The 0.6% rise in April was on par with the pace of gains recorded in both February and March. April's increase takes the current growth cycle into its 15th consecutive month. That's right, the median house price in Australia has risen every month for 15 months in a row, but they're not rising equally everywhere. Here we have the CoreLogic RP data daily home value index, the monthly values. And what you can see is that for last month, Sydney property prices rose 0.4%. For the year, they're up 8.7%. Essentially, Sydney prices right now are roughly flat. Melbourne property prices dropped 0.1%. No cause for concern there. Again, I would just say it's a flat market. But for the year, Melbourne property prices are only up 2.8%, which is less than inflation. And if you want to know why Melbourne property prices are not performing very well, I'll share that with you a bit later on. But then look at Brisbane property prices, up last month 1%, for the year 15.3%. Adelaide last month, property prices are up 1.3%, for the year 14%. If we look at Perth, property prices are up an astonishing 2% just last month, for the year 21.1%. So you can see that although property prices are rising in general, they're not rising the same everywhere. But the question is why? Why are property prices rising so steeply in different areas when interest rates are the highest they've been at for over 12 years, when we have a cost of living crisis, when housing affordability is so low? Here's the answer. Australia is set to have a shortfall of 200,000 new homes by the end of the current financial year, analysts claim. That means that there'll be 200,000 families nationwide who will struggle to find a property to live in. It's a horrible situation. But if you're a property investor trying to find the best places to buy in for maximum capital gain, you need to understand the housing crisis we have in Australia right now. Across the country, there are only 2 states or territories in which there are more dwellings being completed than their share of the nation's population: Victoria and the ACT. Now, if we go back and look at CoreLogic's data for how much property prices are growing, if we look at the capital cities, Melbourne, as you can see, only grew 2.8%, and for the last year, and Canberra, 2.1%. Both cities are growing at less than inflation because they're actually building more homes than the proportion of the population suggests. While other areas around Australia where property prices are rising a lot more, in those areas we're not building enough properties as a proportion of the population that lives there. In fact, if we look at this next chart, which looks at the Australian proportion of building completions in the last 12 months versus the proportion of the overall population, it shows you exactly where we're having the biggest shortfall of properties. So you can see that in New South Wales, we have 31.3% of the Australian population that live there, but we're only building 28% of the number of properties. So not enough properties for the number of people who want to live in New South Wales. Victoria has 25.6% of the Australia's population living there, but are building 32.3% in terms of the number of properties. Queensland has 20.5% of Australia's population, but only had 18.8% of building completions. South Australia, again, you can see that population percentage, the blue column, is higher than building completion percentage, the orange column. Same in Western Australia. Then Tasmania and Northern Territory, again the same situation, but then look at ACT. Population proportion is only 1.7%, but building completions proportion is 2.9%. So you can see clearly which states are having the biggest shortfalls in terms of properties being built. And this crisis we have, especially in terms of not building enough homes, it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon. I mean, when you look at this chart, you can see just how many builders are actually going broke and how that number is increasing year on year since 2022. And the problem is that with more builders going broke, plus higher costs of construction, the issue we have with not enough properties is going to be around for quite some time yet, many years, which is why many of these areas will experience quite strong price growth going forwards. Soaring costs are making building new homes uneconomical in many areas and will restrict home completions below demand until the end of the decade, a survey of 12 property analysis and economists has found. Of the myriad barriers to housing supply, the spike in construction costs is the most binding constraint and has dissuaded many developers from initiating a more robust supply response over the past year despite rapidly rising rents, Knight Frank chief economist Ben Burston said. Jarden's chief economist Carlos Sacho said affordability was the biggest hurdle to increased housing supply, the result of a perfect storm of surging construction costs, high historic land acquisition costs, and high rates, which have reduced borrowing capacity by 30+%. And despite federal government efforts to wind back migration, strong population growth was adding more pressure to the housing market. AMP chief economist Shane Oliver said with immigration at around 550,000 annually, which mind you is more than the population of Canberra, which is resulting in population growth around of 660,000, we should be building around 250,000 new homes a year, according to his own analysis of how much housing is required. By Mr. Oliver's count, given the current rate of completions, the supply shortfall is running around 80,000 dwellings a year at present. Added onto the pre-existing shortfall, we expect the cumulative shortfall of homes to reach around 200,000 by June of this year. And this next chart paints a really startling picture. You can see that the approvals, the orange line, is falling, which means the number of new properties set to be built is falling, and the blue line, completions, is falling as well. So we have fewer new homes being built right now and fewer new homes set to be built in the future because of the approvals falling. So you can see we're well below where we need to be to meet our Prime Minister's building target. And then looking at immigration levels still being so high, the demand is much higher than supply. So what does this all mean? What it shows you is that yes, property prices have reached record highs. Yes, there are many people out there who can't afford properties right now. Yet, because of the supply shortfalls in many areas around Australia, property prices will continue to keep rising despite whatever doom and gloom you might hear in the media. And for many property investors who make their decisions based on what they see in the media, they will look back on 2024 with regret, wishing they'd got into the market sooner. So if you're someone who can afford to enter the property market, the data shows that 2024 is a great time to buy, but not everywhere. You do need to do your due diligence, and if you want help with that, check out the link in the description below to get totally for free the audio version and digital version of my book. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.